If you want to get better at the saxophone, there is only one way to do it, and it's that ugly word that nobody likes, which is practice. There are no secrets, no shortcuts, no magic tricks, just practice. And I know what you're probably thinking.
Great, another practice video.
But my hope is that I can help you transform that perspective by turning around some things that you do in your practice sessions by giving you advice from the pros. All of these tips come from different masterclasses, clinics, performances, and concerts that I've been in with professional musicians. So take some notes, because these aren't wise words from me, but from the best of the best. If you want to sound like the pros, then you have to practice like the pros. So let's dive right in. Tip number 1 is to put your goals under a microscope. If you want to take improvement seriously, then you need to be documenting your goals and be really specific with them. If you have a list of goals that looks like, I want to get better at scales, or I want to get better at soloing, or I want to improve my sight reading, then you're being way too basic. While these are all good things to work on, the problem is that you need to
go deeper than that.
So for example, let's take something simple like scales and be really intentional about what we're getting better at specifically within those scales. Maybe to start, you can improve here by learning and memorizing all 12 major scales with arpeggios at a tempo of your choice. We're not just saying what we need to work on, we're being extremely clear about what we need to practice. So for every goal that you have with the saxophone, I want you to boil it down as far as it will go. If you want to get better at scales, define which ones you're going to practice. If you want to get better at soloing, you can write out which tunes you want to practice and what kind of chord changes that you need to work on. If you want to get better at sight reading, you can list out what kind of keys give you trouble or what kind of rhythms confuse you and go straight to those. Whatever your goals are, be really specific, and don't just say them in your brain either. Make a journal and write them down. That way you have a little bit of accountability for yourself as you practice your goals, and you can also take a look back on these goals and track your progress over time. Tip number 2, commit to your routine. Something that I often tell my music students is that growth in music is not like magic beans. It's more like an oak tree. What I'm trying to say here is that you're not going to rapidly improve overnight, but rather grow slowly over the course of a longer period of time. This means you can't expect to get better with just one 8-hour practice session and wake up the next day and be amazing. It doesn't work like that. It's not the crazy amounts of hours in one day that gets you better, it's the consistent routine that you can stick to that matters more. So if you followed tip number 1 and actually wrote down some goals for yourself, now it's time to strategize a realistic practice routine that fits your lifestyle, and that's going to look different for all of us. For example, let's compare a serious high school music student to an adult with a full-time job and a family. These are two different people with two different sets of goals and two different amounts of time that they can use to practice. The high school music student will probably have things to work on, such as etudes, concert music, audition material, and maybe even some repertoire for some lessons. With all of these things to balance with homework, a part-time job, and other activities, they determine that they can budget about 1 hour for 4 days a week to meet their music goals. The adult musician may not make a living playing music, but still wants to improve their technique in sight reading for the local community band they play in. Because of all the obligations between work, family, and other commitments, they determine they can budget a half hour, 3 days a week to keep in shape. Because they set realistic routines based on their goals and lifestyles, they are able to remain dedicated, disciplined, and committed to this practice routine. So the moral of the story is that consistency is what matters most. Consistency is progress, even if it's just 1 day a week. So whatever your goals are that you have set for yourself, look at what kind of time you have in your week and how you can divide up those goals to practice them over the course of the week. And it's honestly better to start slow here rather than just jump at the gun and try to squeeze in like 3 hours every day. If you have the time and you're committed to that, that's going to be awesome. But for most of us who aren't in music school and have a job or other obligations, it's better to create a practice routine that we can stick to 1 year from now and not feel burned out by the end of the month by trying to practice too much. Again, consistency is best. Tip number 3 is to get rid of all distractions. We live in a world completely full of distractions, and these can wreck your practice habits. Technology is both a blessing and a curse, and the fact that the devices that we use for tools and practicing are the same things that distract us and lead us astray as we're trying to get work done. If you want to improve at something, then you need to dedicate 100% of your attention to it, and anything less than this is going to stunt your growth. Sometimes as I'm practicing, I have my phone out on my stand for a metronome or a tuner or something like that, and with one little noise or one little notification, it can easily turn into 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes of playing chess or answering texts or even just doom scrolling on social media, and then I get really mad at myself because I'm not being productive anymore. So something that I've been trying to do lately is putting my phone on Do Not Disturb or silent, or even just put it away. Put it somewhere completely different so that I'm not distracted by it. So whatever you need to do to get rid of that device, or at least change settings on it so it's not in your way, that can really help your productivity. In addition to phones, friends and other people who are around us as we're practicing can also be a big distraction too. I find it really helpful to find my own quiet space away from other people where they can't disturb me so that I can spend some quality time with my instrument. I kind of treat my practice time like a date. No technology, no other people around, just me and my saxophone working on some quality time. Another big distraction is our own mind, and this is often caused by not taking enough breaks, which leads me to my next point. Tip number 4, break up your practice routine. I can't tell you how many hours of my life that I have wasted with junk practice sessions. I define a junk practice session as one where I'm just sort of going through the motions. I might be playing something on the saxophone, but I'm not really improving at anything. I like to compare this to reading a book while your mind is distracted and thinking about something else. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times when I'm reading, my brain will kind of go into a different direction, and even though that my eyes are scanning the words on the page, my thoughts are completely elsewhere and not in the book. And this is really frustrating because I'm not actually absorbing what I'm trying to read. And then 5 pages later, I have no idea what's happening in the book. The same thing can happen in our practice sessions. If you find that your mind is starting to wander as you practice, that can be a good sign, but it can also be a bad sign too. The good sign is that you have practiced something so much that you're not having to think about it so hard, and that's a good goal to get to. But the bad side of this is that you can accidentally just go on autopilot and start practicing something with a bad habit and not even know it. So if you're finding that you're getting distracted more and more as you play, it's probably a sign that you need to rest and take a break to mentally reset. The easiest solution that I found that works for me is to divide my practice sessions into 25-minute chunks. What I'll do is I'll set a goal, something really specific, and work on just that for 25 minutes. And I literally set a timer for this so that I don't over-practice. After that timer dings at 25 minutes, I'll take a 5-minute break and do whatever my brain wants to do. If that's play a game of chess, I'll do that. If that's to text a friend, I'll do that. If I want to do like 1,000 push-ups to keep in shape, I'll do that. But after that 5 minutes is up, it's on to the next goal, and that process starts over every 25 minutes. This is just what works for me. It works great for my attention span, but you got to find what works for you. The important part is that you are really focused with your undivided attention on the music and on the saxophone, and that you're giving yourself that time to refresh in between what you're working on. Tip number 5, make your warm-up non-negotiable. If there's anything that's helped me retain my chops these days, it's the fact that I spent years of my life doing a great warm-up routine almost daily. The reason that you should make your warm-up non-negotiable, meaning you don't skip it no matter what, even if it's the only thing you do that day, is because a great warm-up will hit all of your fundamentals: tone, technique, and intonation. When you get to this every day, what you're working on is the foundation of your saxophone playing. And all of these things can be applied to whatever you do. If you're a jazz musician, if you like more classical stuff, if you like pop, if you like rock, it doesn't matter what you're working on with the music on your saxophone. You have to play with great technique, with great tone, and with great intonation. My personal warm-up for me takes about 30 minutes. If I can't get to all of these things, I honestly don't feel completely ready to play. And it may seem mundane, but I honestly look forward to warming up. Don't skip it, don't neglect it, don't put it off even for one day. Get into the habit of warming up every single time you touch the horn. Tip number 6, work at the things that you are bad at. Out of all of these things I have on my list, this is probably the most challenging tip. It's also the one that stops us from practicing the most because it deals with things that are hard. As human beings, we don't like hard things. We don't like resistance. It's just who we are. But we need to learn that the hard things are where the growth happens. When we know that we need to practice something that's going to challenge us, something that's going to be difficult, it's really easy to start shying away from that stuff. For example, for me, when I think of something difficult, I start to think of all the brain power I'm gonna have to use. It's gonna take effort to work on it. And who likes to expend extra effort? Not me. But the hard truth is that we have to work on the things that challenge us. Otherwise, we stay completely stagnant in our playing. The reason that the pros are the best of the best is because they spend hours, meticulous hours, grinding and working on the fine details of really difficult stuff. And as they repeat these things in their practice and work on them over and over and over again, suddenly those difficult things become really easy and they don't even have to think about it. So that's why when we hear a pro and like they play something super difficult, we're like, whoa, that's incredible. And to us, yes, it's difficult because we haven't spent the time, but for them, it's just easy. They spent the time working on those hard things. If you think about it, everything in our life was difficult at some point. Even the everyday tasks that we can do in our sleep, tying our shoes, saying the ABCs, counting to 10, simple math. At some point, that was hard for us. But after years of repetition and trying again and failing and figuring out the right way to do things, it just becomes second nature. We don't even have to think about it. And the same thing can be applied to the saxophone and music. What is hard today on the horn may not be hard tomorrow if you just work on the difficult stuff. Tip number 7, take things really slow. This sort of piggybacks off the last idea, but make sure to practice really slow with everything that you do. I am a huge advocate for practicing slow, like really, really slow. Like bottoming out my metronome and taking things way slower than I need to. Even if it's something simple like a scale. If it's giving me trouble, I'll go 50 beats a minute, 40 beats a minute, and give my mind time to process what's in front of me so that I can play it the right way. This comes from some previous times in my life where I've developed some really bad habits by taking things way too fast. I used to get impatient with certain things in music, and if, for example, I was practicing a piece that 90% of it was really good and 10% of it was challenging, I would just kind of say, oh, this is good enough. I think I'll get it once I get to the performance or once I'm in my lesson or whatever. And I can tell you with complete honesty that it never worked out. If I skipped on something in the practice room and I just said, that's good enough, it never worked out for me in the end. And because of that, my lesson or my performance or concert, whatever, it suffered. I didn't play it 100% correct, even though I thought I could get there. So then I had to spend even more time going back and reworking out those things that were giving me issues. And it's all because I was impatient. I didn't take the time to work on it slowly. Remember, we're trying to practice like the pros, and the pros don't settle for 90% good enough. They don't even stop for 99% good enough. They take the time to iron out all the wrinkles in their playing, and to press all of those wrinkles out, taking things slow can really help. Tip number 8 is to practice like you will perform. Once you're established into a solid habit of practicing, it's easy to go from that routine into a rut. It's easy to get lost in all the scales and etudes and patterns and licks and tunes and whatever else you're working on. But don't forget that you're making music here. When you work on something, when you practice something, give it the energy, the passion, the intention that you want when you are going to perform this. With every note that you play on the saxophone, make it like a performance. This takes an extra layer of effort in the practice room, but it is so worth it. Because I hate to say it, but the stuff that we practice with the fundamentals is only half the battle. You have to practice being musical as well. Being musical is not just something that happens magically when we get to a performance. It's something that we have to do with every single note that we play on the saxophone. In the long run, you don't want to sound just accurate, you want to sound beautiful, you want to sound captivating, and you have to practice those things. So something that's helped me is to envision an audience when I practice. I try to have sort of an out-of-body listening experience to myself and think about what the audience would hear as I'm playing whatever I'm practicing. This helps me exaggerate everything that I'm working on musically. It also reminds me to not just be a robot when I practice, but to be a human with intention and creativity and emotion. And what if you don't know if you're being musical enough while you practice? Well, this leads me to my last point. Tip number 9, document your progress. The best way to tell if you are playing something the way you think you're playing it is to listen to yourself. And there has never been a better time as now to document your growth as a saxophonist. If you're not recording yourself on a regular basis, you are missing out on a ton of growth. The reason for this is that after spending hours and hours of practice just with ourselves, we start to hear our playing in a certain way. And sometimes what we have in our head doesn't always exactly match what someone else is going to hear. So by getting our phone out and doing a quick recording of something as we practice, we're able to tell, do I sound like what I think I sound like? For me, I often think that I'm exaggerating something a lot, maybe an accent, a dynamic, something like that. But then I go and listen to a recording of myself and I'm not even close. So then I have to go an extra layer as I'm performing something and try to exaggerate it even more. Had I not recorded myself and not listened back to it, I probably would not have the performance that I had in my head, the one that I thought as I'm playing the music. And also by taking some feedback from my recordings, I know what I need to work on next time. And maybe it's something that I was completely unaware of. What I thought was going fine was definitely not good. And sometimes this is really shocking, but it's also beneficial, which is why I say that you might be missing out on things that you didn't know you should be practicing. Hearing these recordings are not only beneficial to your practice, but it can also be encouraging that the work that you're putting in is worth it. You're growing, you're improving, you are getting better. And all it takes is getting that phone out, hitting record, then going back and taking a few minutes to listen to yourself. So that's it for now. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And my last thing before I say goodbye is to ask you, if you were to complete this list for 10 things, what would you add to it? If you've heard some good advice at some point, and that advice has stuck with you about how to make the most out of your practicing, what is your advice? What would you finish on this list with tip number 10? Put that in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. So thanks for stopping by, everybody. Happy practicing, and I hope you have fun making music.